Welding Manager is a welding data management software solution that stores all welding data including welders, joints, lines, tanks, contractors, welding procedures, welders qualifications, inspection reports such as VT and RT, PQR and WPS, test packages, etc. For piping, structures, and tanks. It complies with welding standards such as ASME and API. The way it works, you import U-joints details from isometrics into Welding Manager and start the workflow for inspection. You will also need to feed the system with initial Matzer data such as WPS ranges, PQR, welders names, etc. Once you have this data, you can start the workflow by reporting who welded which joint and using which WPS. Of course, the system will validate if the welders qualified for the WPS and diameters and thicknesses, and if the joint falls into the WPS ranges or not. You can enter the joints into the system one by one. Or you could import joints details from Excel using our import-export tool for many joints at once. As shown here, a user is importing an Excel sheet that has 4 new joints into an area. Lines, sheets, and spools are imported on the fly. The initial joint basic details are mandatory. You can later report other details through the system such as fit update, weld date, welder, or welders, in case multiple welders welded the joint. Once joints are imported, user verifies as shown from the joints page using search by line number. Every transaction or activity happens to the joint will be stored in the joint history and can be used later for reporting. Details like area, systems, line or tank, drawing number, etc. also will be linked to the joint. As shown, this joint details page shows all these details and can also be printed or exported in a report format to PDF or Excel if required. This gives you full traceability and ensures your data is well structured and ready for handover when the time comes. Adding joint to visual inspection report is filtered to joints that are ready for that. For example, you can't add a joint to a VT report if you haven't reported who welded it yet. This needs to be done in sequence. First you create the joint, then ensure it is linked the proper WPS. You also will need to provide the fit update. Once the joint has these details, you can report who welded it, which will change the joint status from open to welded. Then and only then can be added to a VT report. Joints added to VT report changes the status of the joint from welded to VT. This means it is waiting to be accepted or rejected in VT. While accepting in VT, it will require to specify what is the NDT reports you want it to go through, such as RT or PT or any report type, if you don't have these details yet. An inspector can select the joints to be part of RT based on the percentage required. If the line is 100% RT, this means it will be added to RT by default. All these details can be defined from select NDE page, RT, or PT, or any other report type. Percentage can be defined based on a line, or piping class, or joint type, or even joint diameter. For example, you can define RT for a specific piping class to be 20%. And select only but weld joints having diameter 10 mm or above. Adding joints to RT report or any other NDE inspection report requires the joint to be accepted in VT, which change the status from VT to NDE. This means it's ready to be added to an inspection report to be tested on this report and accepted or rejected. Then define the reason of rejecting it and the penalty joints and defect details, or even if it requires cut and re-weld. If the penalty joint's not linked to the rejected joint, the status of the joint changes to hold. Joints can be added to as many NDE inspection reports as it requires, until it is closed. Only then joint is ready for handover or test package. Every single step or report the joint is added to will also be stored in the joint history. Again, for reporting purposes and traceability. Needless to say that, if the joint is rejected, the system rename it to R1, or R2, or even RW, depends on the number of rejections. Then it moves back to open status to report who welded it the second or the third time. Welding Manager has a set of ready-made reports to help you report your welding data. If for any reason you require to customize these reports to your client formats, it can be done.